Hi, it's Dr. Michael McNeil here. It's actually what we call Boxing Day here today, which is the 26th of December, so it was Christmas yesterday. And managed to see some of my family. My wife's over with her family in Japan at the moment because her dad's not too well, so I've been on my own for for, for the best part of 3 months now. But I managed to see some of my family yesterday, and it was great. It was great to see everybody. And it was been a beautiful day. It's been beautiful, mild, beautiful sunny day today. Great walk along the river. So I feel very, very blessed. Very, you do. You appreciate it. It's been a lovely couple of days. Uh, I, as I'm going to be away, sort of like over New Year time, I thought I've been wanting to sort of like do a video for a while, but it's been so busy last couple of weeks with work stuff and then you have all the Christmas parties, the work Christmas party, you're all over the place. So I haven't managed to do. I've had the theme for a couple of videos for quite a while. But while I was actually having a discussion with, while I really decided to do this today, was I was having a discussion with somebody I hadn't seen for really. I would go, my spiritual mentor hadn't seen them for the best part of maybe 6 months, 9 months or something, and they mentioned something to me, and when they said what they said, I thought, oh, I hadn't even heard about that. And so I was working yesterday, and sort of like when there was just like a little bit of a gap when I was waiting for something to happen, you sort of set a job off, just waiting for it. And I did a quick Google, and I thought, oh gosh, here it is. And so I thought I'd address this, even if it's just it's sort of like a bit after the fact now, but it's important to me, even if it's only sort of like a cathartic thing for me. I think it's worth mentioning. Now, what it was, I didn't. The best way of describing it is that I'm full disclosure here. I in probably 2000 and maybe it was 2018 or 2017, 2018. I left a fellowship that I'd been with for since I think. When was it? Maybe 1996, and I was there, sort of the best part of 2024, 20. What was 99? Yeah, so that's 24 now, isn't it? And 20. So yeah, at least 20 years. And when I actually left, I started to attend what's called Glasgow Prophetic. At that time, it was called Glasgow Prophetic Centre obviously in Glasgow, which is great because I live in Newcastle, which is just sort of like over the border. But so Glasgow's probably it was like 120, 130 mile trip there on a Sunday morning, but it was doable. If you're like me, that where you've done hours and hours of driving, that's not actually that long a drive. And so for probably the best part of a couple of years, was going up and down most Sundays to Glasgow, and then I might combine it with when I was going to the office, when I was going to Bath, so a big long trip around the country, because Bath's about probably 450 miles away or something, 450 kilometers. Sorry, I'm thinking probably it's about 470 kilometers from here, which is the best part of 300 something miles. And I would go up to Glasgow, and then I'd go from Glasgow to Bath. So it was a big eye, but it didn't bother me at the time, and yeah, because it was just great to find somewhere, and it was just like a real breath of fresh air from where I'd been before, and it just allowed me to sort of like to relax a bit, relax spiritually a bit, and sort of feel, and I was generally pretty happy there. And then COVID sort of like happened, and that sort of like arrested that, and then but and really a distance started to what really happened was during COVID and their approach to COVID. I just that the way that was responded to, that separated me in the sense that stopped. I didn't want to go back there, and but I've been through what's called the very. It might sound quite strange, I'm sort of like supposed to be doing philosophy here, and this one's very much not. Not this one's not going to be if you're looking for philosophy, this is probably not the broadcast. I'm sure maybe philosophy will come into it somewhere, but but I think it's just really important from a personal point of view to go through this, learning what I learned. And I went through the Emerging Prophets course, which was done by Glasgow Prophetic Centre, and you learn a bit more, regarding about the gift and the difference between the gift and the calling, and the first one, it's like a semi sort of it's like an intensive course for 3 or 4 days, I think, or something it was then. And so you went up and stayed in a hotel, and you have pretty long days, you're sort of like long days, sort of have. And the first one, I think the first year that I did it, because I think there might have been like a introductory one and then like an advanced one, and so I did the introductory one and then went on to the next year and did the advanced one, but it got interrupted by COVID as well. But the first one, I think I really got a lot out of it. It was great to engage. The second one a little bit didn't get as much out of the second one, because you pair up with different people. You're in a group of 3 or 4 people, and particularly on one of the sessions, I can remember one of the guys I was with, I did not get on with very well at all, and it stopped it from flowing. And so I haven't. That's unfortunately what you remember. Probably most of it was probably okay, but when you got like quite an intense afternoon session where you're supposed to be working with the other 2 people, and one person really you don't get on with, it makes it really difficult, doesn't it? So so all I'm saying is that I really appreciated sort of like Glasgow Prophetic Centre. It's now called Glasgow Prophetic Alliance, I think. It's sort of like it's broadened its base. It's more of an international thing now. And so I really appreciated that sort of like time being there, and I particularly appreciated the ministry, some of the messages that Emma did at that time and did during those sessions. I was listening to those quite intensely. I can remember when I was driving up and down in the early days to sort of going to Bath, and I was really studying those messages. I really got a lot out, because he's a very unique, very profound minister, a very great insight, and a dad as well. Sort of, he's very much more of a theologian, and I think he was part of I think maybe it was a Baptist college in Ireland or something. But he's a real, because Glasgow Prophetic Centre is very much like a charismatic Pentecostal style, whereas I know a dad's quite sort of a more, he's he's somebody I really like, really enjoyed talking to, really, very deep guy. But in order to sort of like bring this to today, what I wanted to discuss today was, I found out, my friend who's sort of like my mentor, sort of like Pentecostal minister, actually said, there's been something seems to have gone wrong at sort of like at GPA and stuff, and she said, some friends of hers had disassociated from there, and I thought, I hadn't heard anything about it, because I don't go there. I haven't been there, for years, in a sense, since really before COVID, and I didn't go sort of like back. I couldn't cope with people worshipping with masks on, singing "I'm no longer a slave to fear," and you've got a mask on your face, diaper on your face. What you on? It's like you're saying you're not afraid to fear, but you've got a mask on. Can't you see these two things are contradictory? That was one of the things. But one thing that really, and I think when we did like an online sort of when COVID was happening, and when we were sort of like we were supposed to be doing some extra residential things, I think, during the year. I think there was at least 2 sort of residential ones, and then you did online stuff, regular online stuff, and it got onto the subject of politics, and the role of the church and the role of politics, the relationship to politics. And if you know anything, if you've done anything about my work, you know that I've done a lot of stuff on that. and what was being said, what was actually said at one of these sessions, like Zoom online sessions, it really, really, when I say it offended me, I'm not saying that it sort of like offended me, sort of like emotionally in some sort of trivial way. But it really, I really couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought, like, it can't be serious. Do we really believe this? Is this really what's being sort of argued? And that really, really provoked me. And it was, and I ended up writing something like, I listened to it. I can remember I listened to it while I was there on the call, and I was just keeping my mouth shut because I thought, there's a lot of people on the call, but the invitation was made to say, right, is everybody on board with this? And I thought, well, no, I'm not on board with this, but I'm not going to say anything because I'm so not on board with it. The problem could be me, I might be the problem. I'm just going to stir up the problem, make a, and so I just kept my mouth shut at that time. But I listened to the call again, just say, maybe it's me, I need to listen to it more carefully. Second time, I listened to it second time. And each time I listened to it, I thought, it's getting worse. You know what I mean? I'm disagreeing more strongly with this every time I listen to it. And that provoked me to, I remember I went off and I wrote between 40 and 45,000 words, I think, on the relationship between the Trump problem, because Trump had just been, because Trump had been elected, and then there was all the trouble for sort of like the 2020 guy, and it was a lot of stuff was around, especially in the UK, because the UK is much more socialist. Europe's much more socialist than, and especially if you know anything about Scotland and the northeast of England and this sort of like area, there's lots of old. There's lots of old style heavy industry, and where you've got old style heavy industry, you've got a lot of unionization. People tend to be much more left wing, and in Glasgow Prophetic Centre, it was even called Red Clydeside. The Clyde's the river, and it was at one time it was actually called Red Clydeside. We used to go up when I was young. We used to go up to sort of like to Glasgow. It was known as, it was radical left place. And so there was a lot of, Trump was a real problem because he'd made such overtures to the Christian community, and there was quite a dramatic reaction to that within it. You saw that in the US, but it was particularly so focused here because people were so offended at this, this immoral billionaire who. People just couldn't handle it, and so, and I was, and it was, and what's actually happened this time, which I didn't know anything about this. This has just sort of like happened at the beginning of November, and then was it just before the of November? November, was it November the US election? Was it November the 4th, November the 5th of November? I think it was 5th of November, wasn't it? And apparently, Emma had, well, it's not apparently, she actually did. This is what happened. They gave a couple of 2 or 3 prophecies, and they were talking about the US, and they basically saying that God's going to punch Trump in the face, and the blood there, and the American democracy is going to crumble, and there's going to be, you can watch this. I'll put the links on to the various videos, which. And what happened was that the let me make sure I get this correct, because this is one of these, and the Apostolic Council of Prophetic Elders, which is like a US sort of like umbrella sort of covering group, governmental sort of like covering group, which. Because Bishop Bill Hammond is generally considered to be the father of the modern prophetic movement, and Emma acknowledges him as the father of the movement, and there's always been, especially my time on ACPE, there was always a lot of people who are members of the ACPE who would be coming to speak. Say for example, Jennifer LeClaire came to speak at the at the at the conferences, the training when I was there, and so we had. So you very much knew that GPA was part of this movement, but in response to these prophecies that Emma had given, the ACPE had issued a rebuttal and basically said they do not accept these as legitimate words, and they consider them to be false prophecies. Now, they did not say that Emma and the GPA, this is part of the confusion, I think, which is not helpful, is that people have been saying that the AECP have called Emma a false prophet, and that's not what was being said. But what has been said in these cases, in these three, I think there's three words that they've, there's written responses to this, and I can I'll put the links in, and I'll probably do a blog post as well where I gather all these together in one place, because I think it's helpful. And some of the responses are some of my sort of like comments that I'm going to make about it. And they'd actually did not accept that these were legitimate prophetic words. They said that, and they've given detailed reasons as to why. And so, in the sense that, because there were serious, the serious words, they're basically saying that, that God's going to punch Trump in the face, and the US is he's going to become ungovernable. He's not going to be able to put his team together, and and they are considered, and democracy is going to fail, and and so, and what sort of like really struck me, but I didn't know this had happened, and so I've just sort of like the last couple of days, I've just been sort of watching this. I've watched the GPA A stuff, and I've watched the responses, and I've read the responses of the AECP, and I think there's some things. Maybe this is just a cathartic thing for me, because in a sense, it's when I was frustrated in the sense of what happened during COVID, obviously, and the fact that, and I tried to sort of, in my own way, talk to people within sort of GPA at that time of how unreasonable I don't understand your response, what's going on. And in many days, and it was like we're not going there. It was like SmackDown time. We're just not. There's not going to be a conversation here. And it got to the point where if I did anything on, if I tried to post on the Facebook group or something, I would get like personal attention from one of the senior leaders, rebutting what I was saying. And I thought, well, I'm not. I didn't want to cause strife, didn't want to cause trouble. And I thought, no, that's it. In the sense, I thought, I'm not the leader. I'm not a leader there. I've got no leadership responsibility. This is the way the leaders want to do it. That's at the end of, there is no discussion. And so, but, and I suppose what I'm sort of like saying is that I'm trying to be as straight up as I can be, that if there's some sort of emotional colouring here, I'm not holding any resentment against, and I appreciate, I really appreciate what Emma and David, and I know them personally, it was like, I would, I especially sort of like, in a sense, David, I had quite a lot of, with my wife, wife really liked David, Emma's husband. And so, and so I'm not saying this out of some sort of animus, that's what I'm trying to say, or some sort of resentment, or it's because of things that have happened. But this sort of like incident, I think is quite disturbing, and it's disturbed me, and that's why I wanted to say something about it. There's lots of people who said a lot of things, and it's, in a sense, it's news that's already happened. But I think me sort of like looking at it fresh and seeing actually what's happened, I think it's profoundly disturbing, because I mean, Emma says it, and they said it in one of the videos. I'll put the link at this particular point in the video, and it says that the real issue, the real distinction between what the AECP and GPA are, the difference is the point of difference really is, what is the role of the political? And that is the yeah, I think that does. I think that really pinpoints the issue very, very well. Is that, yes, the difference between them is there. But I think in this particular instance, because if you read it, if you read what's on the GPA site and their commentary of their response to the ACPE, and then there's a proverb, isn't there, that sort of like that says that the first person that speaks seems really reasonable until you hear the other side. So, and this is why I wanted to see everything. I wanted to see the back and forward of what had gone on, because there'd been like the initial prophecies, that there'd been the response and the censure by the ACP, and then there'd been a response from the GPA to what the ACP had said, and then there'd been like some sort of like addendums by the ACB, or like some additional responses, some much shorter but additional responses, and some Q&A type responses. And there's some stuff I think that really should be sort of like clarified and made clear, because one of the I think the most disturbing aspects of this for me is that they I think they say this is what they I think Jennifer Leclerc, who in the second response, she, and I think Cindy Jacobs as well in her additional response as well, make the point that Emma was actually a member of the ACP. Now, I don't know whether she's just withdrew a membership or the ACP, the background of the ACP was that it was started 25 years ago, so that because in response to somebody within the new prophetic movement, because Bill Hammond is generally considered to be, during the early 60s and then through the 70s, he really became the pioneer of the what's called the modern prophetic movement. It's quite different from sort of like from the what I would call the prophetic movement that came out of Kenneth Hagin, and I'm Word of Faith, sort of that side of things. So I think the prophetic movement is quite different. There is some crossover and some significant figures who cross over between the two movements, but they're quite different. And which is probably another reason why I sort of like, sometimes the prophetic I don't sit with it too well. And whereas my wife's much more comfortable with the sort of like the prophetic, and we have a soul, we've got a marvelous guy called Mark Burt Machin, sort of, who started the soul sort of meetings. And I used to really like going to the meetings, but when COVID happened, they all sort of like went online. You only have the occasional ones, and I don't want to go online for a meeting. I do too many online meetings. I just don't want to go. And so, that style of sort of, the prophetic sort of like style, and the ACP was started up because of some people in the modern prophetic movement at the time. Somebody had been doing like national prophecies, and they were considered to be incorrect, and they caused like a lot of confusion. And so the ACP was set up by, if you like, the prophetic ministers to deal with this particular problem. It's almost a bit like, trying to have some sort of accountability, some sort of authority structure where people who receive could address them, because there's other, periodically, especially, you can see there's various movements. The leaders of those movements have gone astray and got, if you think of the children of God, and sort of like they went off into sexual license and sin, and flirty fishing and all this sort of stuff. And you see these people who were once considered really like mainstream orthodox revivalists, great breakthroughs, working with youth, part of the big Jesus movement and stuff. And some of them, went off and got involved in sort of like strange cultish behavior and stuff. And so, in a sense, the ACP was meant to sort of almost be like a policing body, I suppose, or some sort of relational body where people could address fellow leaders, and or people who were considered at the same level, and just bring some sort of government and some sort of accountability for people who are there. And so I think one of the most disturbing sort of like aspects, I think, of this, what's gone on with this between the ACP and GPA was that if you read, say, the GPA statement of their history, where they are, this is all laid out, this is all written, this is what they printed for this particular time. They've sort of like said, right, we accept, we honour Bill Hammond as the founder of the movement of the. And then my immediate response was, but if you see if you then go and read the ACP response to those prophecies regarding the US, now you've got to remember the ACP it's essentially it's a US organization. So what you've had is you've had somebody from another nation basically speak with prophetic authority and saying to your nation that this is what God's saying about your nation, and you are, if you like, the prophetic overseeing body. And if that body responds to you, sorry, I haven't quite finished a previous thought there, which I know. I said that Emma was once considered a member of the ACP, and one of the rules of the, or if you like, one of the relational rules of the ACP was that if you are, in order to try and stop these excesses that happened during the 60s and 70s and stuff with with people giving, wild prophecies that caused a lot of trouble and a lot of confusion, was that if you were going to give, say, like something that's like a national and international level type prophet, if you're going to release a national prophetic word or an international prophetic word, you'd really want to check, wouldn't you? You'd really want to, I would anyway, you'd really want to sort of make sure that all the people that you really trusted, or that you considered your mentors, or that you considered people who had really spoken into your life and been a blessing to you, you'd really want to. And we were grilled. This is another thing. We were really drilled when we were doing our prophetic training that we should always have our words. We should always submit our words to, if you like, your peers, your prophetic peers. And if you had a mentor, you would not release a word unless your prophetic mentor, who's considered senior to you, had looked at your word and you may well have a discussion to say, well, actually, your phrasing here might be off. I'm not sure if you're scripturally accurate on this point. You know what I mean? You're just, it's like the power of peer review, isn't it? And what was supposed to happen was that if you were a member of the ACP, you would submit your word. Obviously, if it was something like this high level word that could cause a lot of confusion, reaction, hurt people, upset people, and cause a lot of strife, you would do this before you did it. And in this case, that did not happen. Now, I don't know whether both sort of like Cindy Jacobs and Jennifer Leclerc made this point in the video, so I'm not speaking out of out of turn, but they both said that Emma had been a member but had not submitted this word to them or for clarification, and also the timing of the word being just before the American election. It was considered extremely injudicious and inconsiderate sort of at time, and so that was one of their, in the sense their rebuttals to what had happened, and part of their judging of the word as unsafe and rejecting it as an accurate prophecy coming from God. And so I do think that's an important point, because if you are saying in the sense in your defense, you're releasing a document where you're saying, right, this is our history. We recognize these people as authorities, as authorities, as mentors, as people that, and yet when those same people that you would consider as your mentors, and that you are in an umbrella organization where they should be speaking into you, you totally reject their counsel, I would think me personally, I find that astonishing, and I find that uh, I think in the ACP, I think in when Jennifer Clare in her her second response to it, in the response to the response of she, I think she makes that point. I think quite. I mean, she's very elegant. She's a very articulate person. If you've sort of like listened to Jennifer, and she makes it very, very clear. And she just says what the AECP was looking for from the GPA was some sort of acknowledgement that there was something wrong in either in the process and in and in the content of the work. It was like at least acknowledge that the decision to release the word without submitting it first or to the wider body, something that dramatic and that, the really very dramatic, a word with the type of language it used. It was just looking for some sort of acknowledgement that there was a problem, and that hasn't been forthcoming. And in fact, quite the opposite. If you actually watch, I watched the GPA session where I think this is the one done sort of like a week or so later after the initial one. I think is it the 17th, maybe the 17th, but this was like their first, in the sense, their response to what had gone on, what had happened, and this was their broadcast. And so I went through this broadcast, and I don't think anywhere in that broadcast can you detect any sort of deference to the ACP at all, to people who would be considered, the major prophetic figures of the if you like, the people that, like I was saying, some of them in the 70s, the 80s, 90s, the real, and then you've got sort of like Jennifer, who's more of in between. That's the interesting thing, because there's this whole generational dimension to this, and the implication being that one of the things that's been so destructive in this episode is almost like as if the GPA was positioning, and it says this. I mean, this is a shocking thing to say. I think in their sort of like the defense at the end of one of the things they say at the end of the document is they're putting it, they're casting it in terms as if you know the picture, if you know the story in one of the chronicles where it sort of like talks about the old prophet who's been in a place, but a young prophet has to come from another. The Lord calls another prophet into where this old prophet lives to give a message for that area, and the implication being that the old prophet has got so backslidden that God couldn't speak to him and couldn't use him anymore, so this young prophet had to come in. And part of the phrasing of this defense is almost like, right, you lot are like the old prophets stuck in their idolatry, and GPA is now representing this new generation of purified prophets who are, and a part of Jennifer's sort of like rebuke, because Jennifer, I think, is the same generation as sort of like Emma and probably myself, to be honest, and sort of like sitting in between these these great prophetic elders and the new younger generation of people, and that is disturbing. I find I'm just saying that for myself. It's just my opinion. I've got no role. I've said that I've got I've been through the GPA program, and because obviously the problem is, it's like when you've looked at the responses, when you looked at all the comments and obviously the GPA's here in the UK, the ACP's in the US, and there's this sort of like dimension that people who have been very much who've been very much influenced by GPA and have really sort of like been encouraged and considered it sort of like the almost like the European branch of the American prophetic movement. The Bill Hammond was American, that's where it started, and then but prophetic movement is now here, and there was always a close to me, there was always a very close working relationship between the US, and Emma was always going over to the US, and the US were coming here, and Jennifer, like when I was training, Jennifer came over, spoke, and and when you see these videos, the ACP members are saying, yes, Emma's got this unique teaching gift, amazing teaching gift, and we're not saying that she's a false prophet. We're saying that, but these prophecies are wrong. And so they were, in a sense, they're looking, but that response hasn't been coming. And in fact, it's compounded, it's been reinforced that there's been no movement. And I don't even know what there hasn't been, because when there's been no further discussion of this issue, because the ACP have said, and this is going to be our final statement on this issue. We don't want it to be like a back and forward thing. Because when you read some of the responses, one of the criticisms that the GPA had said to, put in their written responses that, we weren't given a chance to respond. We weren't informed about this. It just happened in the media. But some of the when you listen to the Q&A from the ACP, they said that they'd actually contacted Emma and David and said that unless there's a retraction, although this is going down, or and so that even just establishing the basic facts of actually of what went on, there's something, I think there's something very dysfunctional, something very wrong there. And if you are, even out of deference and respect for your elders, you would, if you're absolutely 100% convinced that, oh no, this is right and God's given you this special, you're the one that's speaking the best, because it hasn't been. I mean, this is one of the things that I think was so disturbing was in Jennifer's video, where she was saying that this apparently has been happening for the last 18 months, that people have been trying to engage with what's being with GPA and what's been going on, and because of the tone of some of the prophetic words and the upsets that's been caused, and and the thing is, if you're the if you've got to the point where you believe that you've got God's word, and you understand that prophets are going to sometimes upset people and speak truth to power and all these things that happen, but you forget that Scripture also talks about doing things with respect and doing things with gentleness, because you can pick any stream of Scriptures, and if you want to be rude, and if you want to be arrogant, if you want to, you're speaking this cutting words are going to chop people up, you can justify it from Scripture. But I think something that's been so disturbing about that whole thing seems to be this lack of respect for elders. Now, I'm not somebody who finds it easy to fit into any sort of any sort of structure or fellowship, because I think so much, and so I am not being critical of wanting to, because you can, when you're in a place, when you're in in a place and you're growing, it gets to a certain point where it, just like in your natural life, you have to leave your parents' home, and you have to make your own way, don't you? In a sense, you always have a relationship and love for your folks, but you're making your own way. And I think in many ways you could almost look at the GPA in that sense of something that's been, part of this sort of prophetic movement that was very much an American thing, but it's now growing, establishing itself, and it's now almost like it's establishing its own identity. It's no longer under the cover. That's obviously something that's happened, which is fair enough. But if somehow, that this is how cults begin, isn't it? When people start to believe that they are the ones with the word. And so that's been back and forward, and I would include all that that information. But there seems to me a basic there's some of the stuff of what's being said, of some of the objections, and some of the objections in in the video where where GPA, in a sense, where it's almost like a defense of themselves, defense of the video, defense of what's gone on and their response to the ACP. some basic facts just don't correlate. It's like things are asserted, and then you listen to sort of like Jennifer and their response. It just doesn't tie up, and that to me is just profoundly disturbing, because that's going to polarize people, and it's going to cause strife. It's going to cause division. It's disturbing. I think I just want to say that. And I suppose that's sort of like part one of what I wanted to say. Now, part two, and this is where I think where the sort of like the rubber, to me, this is where the rubber really meets the road, and where I really, I find the implication of the word, so like the Emma gave, that that God's going to punch Trump in the mouth, and blood's going to sort of like come out, and that the American democracy is going to fail, and that he won't be able to get his team together, and all this sort of stuff. This is where I'm not wanting to speak out of turn here, but I find that unbelievably crass. Not that because she does make the point. She does say it's very much to do with how you view politics and the role of politics, and that's the real difference, what she sees between the two. And I think you can accept that, and you can say yes, fine. And if and my objection to that's exactly when the road where I thought I'm just not going to be able to fit in here, because my view of politics and my view of the role of politics and the importance of politics, the importance of involvement, the importance of the church being involved in politics, and the importance of it's just. And if you've known, I did a whole the 3-4 hours of stuff where I'm talking about the legitimacy of political involvement, then looked at Romans 13, and it's like the church cannot be not involved. It's like you cannot not be involved in politics. It's just how you're going to be involved, and so the idea that somehow that you're going to stand outside, and it was like one of the things that I suppose that that jarred me so much watching the video today was when it's saying that a nation is not reformed through political change. And now if you're trying to say by that there has to be some sort of if you like spiritual revival that then brings transformation into the nation, you can fair enough, I can grant that as sort of like a point. But most change in a nation, just think of this empirically, most change in your nation comes around because of the kind of politicians that you've got sitting in the office of government. If you got dodgy you know what I mean, that's so patently obvious, that because most of the stuff, you only need one person with an agenda that really goes after, like our current prime minister, they can wreak havoc within the nation because of the power that they have. And so to me, it's so you have to be able to engage intelligently with the political, and this is where, in a sense, this is where I think Emma in her book and in her has good insight, is there has to be some sort of separation, but they tend to then push, if you like, almost like a political agnosticism, and and that's where I think it's. You have to understand. It's a bit like when in 2020 in the US election there, absolutely everybody from the American Communist Party through to all sorts of strange LGBT groups to Twitter, they all united behind Biden to defeat Trump. It was remarkable. The alliance, there was even evangelicals for Biden, wasn't there? There wasn't evangelicals for Biden this time round, but there was, which I think is very telling. But everybody understood that Trump was aligning himself, whether you could consider this cynical thing or the Trump was aligning himself with the conservatives, with the Christian right, with however you want to do it. And they understood that that Biden was not. And so you had this bizarre coalition to try and defeat Trump. You know, whether you believe Trump was defeated legitimately or not, that's not something to discuss now. But it's like, so we have to, in our own political position, as Christians, as believers, as church group or whatever, we have to be prepared to look at a candidate, look at policies, look at what they stand for, and give support when we need to, because it is who is in power and the policies that they are going to follow that is going to affect you. You have to have a place. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to. It's the way, you know. As I like watching Dan Bongino a lot. If you've never watched him, you have to watch him. It's great sort of Dan Bongino show on Rumble. But one thing he says, you've got to look at politics as like a spreadsheet, and and politicians as well. He says that, you know, it says you can't, you know, politicians are crooks, they're dishonest, they're people, you know. But it said you have to look at politics and different policies and stuff. You look at it like a spreadsheet and say, how does this person vote? Is that a vote for us? Are they going to forward conservative ideas? Are they going to, you know, preserve? If that's the case, then yes, you know, they're like a +1 and a -1 from the other side. And it's like, and you have to understand that that you can't get stuck in demanding that these politicians are principled, that they're moral, that they're, no, because that's just not going to happen. If somebody's it's like you have to understand the mechanics of politics and of how it works and of the operation of power in your nation. And it's like, and if somebody is going into office and they are going to guarantee your religious freedom, and they are going to look to you as a voting bloc, and they are going to make concessions to you and improve the nation, you know, and that's the reality of politics. If we're going to allow in crazy nutty people that want to mutilate children and there's something wrong and give you abortion on demand, you've got to be empirical enough and pragmatic enough to actually understand that those things are bad, these things are good, even though these people might be immoral in their private lives and involved in all sorts of stuff in their private lives. How are they voting? You know, it's like having that sort of like spreadsheet. But I think one of the things that's sort of like a more general thing. I've discussed that at length in other works I've done in the other videos. I encourage you to watch those. But I think one of the things that was most disturbing to me about this word was when it said that that God's going to punch him in the mouth, and there's going to be a lot of blood, and he's not going to be able to govern, and he's not being able to get his team together. Now, you have to, anybody that's followed the US, I've followed the US so closely, probably the last maybe the last sort of like year, it's been really, really, really closely. It's like, I watch Dan Bongino every day, and that's sort of like US a lot. So what, like, I started sort of like watching Tucker. That's what got me into sort of Dan, and obviously Tucker, people know Tucker Carlson, don't they? And American frontline doctors, during COVID and stuff. And I've got progressively more aware and got much more detailed knowledge. I've got probably more detailed knowledge of the US politics and the comings and goings of it is than I have in our own nation here now. Lord's really sort of like put the US on my heart, and I knew that this was like an existential. What has been going on in the US during this Trump's comeback and stuff, which has been remarkable. It's an existential struggle for the US as a republic, based on the rule of law, and you have democracy as an element there. It's been an existential struggle for people that wanted to transform, if you like, the US into basically another European style statist, influenced by sort of, we're very much influenced by socialism in Europe, and it was and because the US is preventing the globalists from, transforming the planet the way they want to. It's always because of its constitution. There's limiting elements in the American Constitution that prevent this sort of a transnational government from exerting its authority over the US. Whereas you had a movement within the US in the last 20 or 30 years that's been, what's called cultural Marxism, within the universities, within the media, within, that's, and basically, and now people have come out of it and have been actively working against and saying that they want to get rid of the Constitution, they want to change the Constitution, they want to make it more so that it becomes more, if you like, a part of this, this one world order. And what was I think was so, one of the elements, we'll keep getting this, is probably the third time I said this, but one of the things that was so disturbing, I think, about that sort of like that word was that it would, this was that it would prevent the team from coming together. Now, if you look at what Trump's managed, his comeback was, anybody that's observed and looked at the US and saw his political comeback and saw him survive at least 3 assassination attempts, and saw how, if you've watched some of the animations of him turning his head a fraction of the second, and how close, because he got hit on the ear. And if you look at the timing, somebody's actually done, they've done like computer reconstructions of actually what went on, and how, and when you hear the personal testimonies about Trump from people that are close to him, and how he's a great father, a great grandfather, and how he's really been concerned for meeting and going the second mile to meet the families of police officers that have been killed, and attending their funerals, and the Afghan families, and the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, and meeting and going down and meeting the immigrant, the families that, whose daughters were killed by, illegal immigrants and stuff. And when you hear, I think it's Paula White used to be his, and you hear these testimonies about it, because people want to sort of focus on, this sexualized sensuousness. Well, my God, man, if I was a billionaire in 80s US, I shudder to think of the way I would have behaved, and what do you expect? But it's like, they haven't looked at the overall character of the man. If you're a billionaire, you used to get in your own way. Yeah, you're going to be narcissistic. Yeah, you're going to be loud. You're going to be. But people have got to know him and say the difference between this public persona that he has and the man. And the, just people don't really know what they're talking about. When they're sort of like, how Trump was described as being, the language that was used in that word is just so. Just seems so off the wall if you know anything about the man himself. But his team that he's been putting together, Pete Hegseth for SecDef, they call it in the US, Secretary of Defense in the US. If you spend time, I've spent time listening to hours of Pete Hegseth. Really, I thought, this guy sounds really interesting. And because he's been on the Sean Ryan podcast, and if you're only ever going to watch one thing to find out who Pete Hegseth is, watch him. I'll see if I can try. I'll get the link and I'll stick it in a description. Watch his discussion with Sean Ryan, and you realise, and the quality of that the quality of the character of that guy, the depth of his knowledge, his expertise, you understand that he is the perfect candidate for that position within the US administration. Tulsi Gabbard, she's been nominated as for I think it's Director of National Intelligence, isn't it? Again, watch her on the Sean Ryan podcast. If you're only going to watch one thing, watch her on there. But she's been on Jordan Peterson. She's been on a load of sort of like these. She was on Joe Rogan. If you want to watch her on Joe Rogan, you will find, and when you find out about her life story of her, you understand that is one of the most articulate, intelligent, insightful figures who absolutely, ideally, for that position to bring reform, have the right priorities. They're exceptional. And Trump's this team that he's been putting together, it's as if, you know, and if an RFK for health, human service, for if you know, people try and focus again on some of the fringe ideas they've got, blah blah. Who cares? But his whole lifestyle as an environmental lawyer, he's saying that we've got to examine what's going to be going on with the food, with the autism. You know, gone from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 35. What's going on? You know, just saying it's rubbish and chemicals in the food, whatever it is. We're going to investigate this, and this team that's coming together. It's as if, to me, it's like if you understand that the Lord really does rule over all, you know, that this is that the Almighty rules in the affairs of men. You should be able to look at this team, and with, you know, obviously being part, you know, I work for you know, I'm a technical person, but I provide technical services to, you know, the ministry where I work. But it's like you when you look at the quality of this team, it was as if they've been prepared, that God has been preparing them for this time. It's like, I know one of the prophecies that Kenneth Copeland I think gave, it said that the nation is in the process of being reborn. And it's like, and you can see that with the remarkable consensus that Trump's, and the optimism and the positive, and the people he's pulled into this coalition within the US, and people who are, as you know, and people who, you know, the ethnic groups which were, you know, have never, you know, there's been some sort of like Hispanic community, some Hispanic communities in who haven't voted Republican since the 1860s, voted like 100% in some of these border villages, the border towns, and sort of it. And you know, he's built this astonishing. He's brought people together. He's brought the nation together. And when you see the quality of that coalition, the quality of the people he's bringing into government, who are concerned about the nation before the party, before that, they're concerned to make, you know, people, you know, think of, yeah, make America great again, make America healthy again. Who cares about the acronyms and that these, yeah, and the very things that they're accused of being, which is like fascist, racist, but he's brought this team together that's the absolute opposite of this. You know, intelligent, articulate people that care about America and will enable the nation to be born again as a nation. And I think that, to me, is why, I suppose, that it's why I find the word so objectionable. It's not so much the first part. The first part of the video was very much about, you know, I was discussing this, what I suppose you would almost call the religious politics between the ACPE and GPA and the response, and trying to establish basic facts. And the remarkable thing is that basic facts can't even be established. That on its own should be disturbing. But I think what's so disturbing to me, I think, is this not being able to actually understand that this is a miracle that's unfolding before our eyes, of what's happened with Trump. And in the sense, because of Trump's attitude, because of his determination, because of his focus, because of his, I mean, it's like people say, probably anybody else in the whole, he had all these court cases against him, and they tried to, something like 105 different cases that you had to sort of like deal with. And then you had these assassination attempts. It's like Trump could have retired to Mar-a-Lago or any island in the whole world and lived out his life, and never got involved in politics. He chose to get involved in politics because he cared, and he loves his country. And you can look up sort of like, really early videos of Trump, sort of like when he was a young man and stuff, basically the same, talking about how much he loves his nation. And so for people to, I don't know, it seems to me to just be a catastrophic absence of insight to see how this is a miracle in motion, and it seems to ignore, the content of where they said, oh, this chaos is going to be, these riots going to be, all this stuff's sort of like going to break out. But we know how Trump governed the last time, and we know that there wasn't wars. There wasn't this, and even now, even before he's got in office, things have changed. There's been utter chaos the last 3 or 4 years, and even now, even before he gets in office, people want to speak. And the Ukraine thing, Putin, it's like it's the exact opposite. The only people that want to create violence and insurrection are Marxist agitators who have been, if you like, seeded within American culture for the last 20 or 30 years. You see this within sort of like within Ivy League universities and stuff, and who have established, and they are the ones that they've been the focus of the violence and the agitation and calling him Hitler and they've been the fascists, the very thing. This is a classic left-wing thing that you do. You accuse your enemies of what you are. You project onto them, and it's like, it just seems to me, that to me is the most disturbing, and it just seems a total lack of seeing the God actually work out the rebirth of a nation. And that's been, in the sense, by, especially, within, I'm within the word, I'm still always going to be, I'll always be a word of faith person, I think. But, in the sense, the prophetic words that come through through Kenneth Copeland, and, talking about the rebirth and the restoration of the nation. There's a massive, it's just the first step. I mean, everybody, if you listen to sort of like to Trump and his team, you understand that this is just a first step of the need to rebuild and reshape the nation, and also the relationship with the different countries in the world. And, what's been going on in sort of like in Argentina, where they amazing. It's amazing what that guy's managed to do after 50, 60, 70 years of decay in Argentina. Just come in and, the utter, get rid of the socialism in the nation, and we need to understand who our friends are in this fight, and who we are to be allied with. That doesn't mean that we haven't got stuff to say, and that doesn't mean that church and state are merging, and that's not it. And we do need to be wise in our relationships with, but we need to understand who our allies are and who our friends are, and who, in order to save the nation. So I think I'm going to sort of like stop there, because I just wanted to say and that's the thing. I I really enjoyed. I got a lot out of, and I really appreciate what went on in that sort of like a time where when I left the previous fellowship and I was with GPC. I thought Emma and David, I loved it. I loved those, I loved being able to go up there, and it was a very sort of like special time. Now, it was, and I was disappointed with, stuff that happened with COVID and stuff. And I could see there was this enormous difference, within, of how, I considered politics, which caused me to sort of like to leave. But I think, which caused sort of like this great separation in a sense. And then what went on through COVID, I just thought, no, I can't go along with, because that's, that I'm not a leader. I'm not in charge there. It's like they said, I can remember it was on the website. If you're happy with this, then please come with us. And I thought, I'm not happy with that. I can't go. And so, but I think for something like this to happen, to give a word about another nation, to try and speak into that nation with that sort of authority, to ignore those who are considered your mentors and your prophetic elders, and to be completely unrepentant about that, in a sense, to any degree whatsoever. And it's been something that hasn't been just going on, just not with this word. It would be bad enough if it was just with this word, but apparently it's been rolling on between 12 and 18 months. And there has been this attempt to have a conversation to say that what's been going on. And, I think there's something fundamentally wrong there. And so, I mean, that's just me expressing my opinion and I'm not a leader. I'm not involved. I've got no sort of overseeing role. And I suppose that's another thing which I found. I'll make this my final point, which I was utterly, I was astounded by, because we had something called the British Council of Prophets. Would have been something like 7 years old this year, and it was meant to be. I suppose it was meant to be a little bit like the British ACPE. Provide some sort of framework, some sort of code of ethics, some sort of accountability. And you had, and so I thought, well, it would be really interesting. When I found out about this sort of like a couple of days ago, I thought, but it's going to be really interesting, because I knew Emma was part of that. Was a core leader within the AAC, and the British Council of Prophets. And I thought they probably made some sort of statement about this and so I go over to their website, and the council has dissolved itself. And this must have happened really, really recently. And because I had a link to the contact page for all the people that are on the page, and that page is still actually live, but all the other pages are there. It's just got this single page statement by somebody who wasn't even in the, it's, they describe themselves as a leader, core, but when you look on the page of who they were within there, they weren't even part of the core leadership team, but it's just a notice of dissolution. And it had this, what I would just call this, to me, it just seems like political, it's like, I'd call it prophetic dribble, on this page of, all these sort of, what the equivalent of prophetic talking points on. And I just thought, how can this would have been. Now, I do not know how this. I hope to, perhaps, I suppose, when the sting of this goes out of me, I hope to be able to sort of like have a discussion with a local leader who I know used to be part of the British Council of Prophets, and actually ask him, when did this dissolve? Did this dissolve in response to what has gone on between GPA and the ACPE? Was this a reaction? Because some just don't know. But it seems astonishing to me, because this would have been something that you would have thought that an overseeing body that's trying to show some sort of code of conduct, some sort of ethics that are specific to the prophetic movement, because because it was, if you read this sort of like this drivel that they've left as stable of this page, so it's now going to be concentrated to be part of, the church, and it's going to be part of the ministry of the church. And you think, well, yeah, but that doesn't really mean anything, because because the whole point of it was that the specialization of the prophetic, for people to learn about the prophetic ministries. You're always going to have places like the GPA where because this is the sort of like their emphasis, and they're teaching and they're training other people regarding the prophetic. That's always going to be the case, even if, yes, you have your own churches and stuff, but you're always going to have people that are specialists in certain areas and who are, it just didn't seem to make sense. But you would want some sort of overseeing body to deal with it when people start going off and do stuff. And I thought this is exactly the reason why, when you have this utter dysfunction with what's gone on between the ACP and the GPA, you would want to have that sort of body that, yes, there might have been some sort of accountability or some sort of statement, but it's gone. It's like, it's astonishing to me. That's, I have to say that, that this is my personal opinion. I've got no skin in this game other than, full disclosure. I went through the GPA and I went through the training courses, and I really appreciate it. I like the time there. Yes, politically, I think the position they take, they have their reasons for the position they take, and I think, if you have good reasons for what you do, Scripture doesn't make that clear, that of having good reasons. As long as you have good reasons, there's some places in Scripture where it does say that as long as people are certain they're not, and they have the reasons for behaving and doing the things the way they do, we have to give space and liberty and freedom to do that. Now, it might be, let's say in my case, because my primary point of departure is I do not agree with the interpretation of politics, and I think it needs to be it's far more. I assign it a totally different role. So I understand that, you understand that group, but it does seem to me that there's been a severe, at best, it's dishonorable the way they've treated what's gone on, but it's distressing. But we should be able to, but that in a sense is a spiritual thing that has to be worked out, and with grace and with people, community. Hopefully people are talking behind the scenes, but it does seem to me utterly the thing that's so frustrating is the inability to see that this team that Trump has actually put together, and the quality of the team, and the skills and the vision that he's bringing to the nation, you should be celebrating this as not as a matter of spiritual idolatry, but it's amazing to see. It's like it's an opportunity for the nation to be reborn, and for this model of innovation, for this model of change, for this model of bringing people together, and get rid of the Marxism and the socialism. And it's if we're, and I suppose this is one of the things that irritated me as well, is that, my God, and I mean, I couldn't understand this way. It's like, because when I watched sort of like in the sense, the GPA video, and eventually when it gets to the point of, right, what's the state of our own nation? What's the state of Scotland, for God's sake? I'm a Scot living outside of Scotland, but my God, for, John Knox sort of like, then he said, give me Scotland or I die. His passion and his desire so much for the nation, and the utter state, the degradation and the destruction and the collapse of our own nation here in the UK. I just don't understand how we've got the nerve to prophesy about any other nation on the planet, to be honest. Let's put our own house in order. If ever there's a house that needs to be put in order, it's Scotland. It really is. We've fallen so. From where we have fallen as a nation. It's a terrible thing, and but so yeah. So sorry, this has been total diversion, nothing to do with philosophy. I've got one other one. I want to get back to philosophy. That's the thing. I'm supposed to be discussing my own work. I want to get back to sort of like philosophy. There is another theological subject that I do want to talk about. I actually do want to talk about because I think it's, and that's praying in tongues, and which I think I will. That's my next video, I think, and then maybe I'm going to hopefully, maybe not, maybe I want to get back. There might be other ones. Thing I'm gonna bounce between. I can see now. I'm gonna bounce between philosophical subjects and topics and themes and themes of my own work and some theological ones. I can see that it's happening. I think I might have to end up splitting up the two different channels for to make it clear what the different channels are doing. But I hope this is just been a personal thing. It's probably maybe it's more a cathartic thing for me. But I don't. It's one thing to disagree. I think with people. It's one thing to say when we disagree, thing, but it's quite different to disagree and then be so sure of your own position that you're not even prepared to consider those that are your elders, and that you're not even prepared to consider, because even just by right of their position, just a matter of honor, there should be some sort of willingness to communicate, and I think that's what's been I suppose that's what's been most distressing for me. So I need to judge myself on that as well and challenge myself, I think, in that area. But I hope maybe this I will sort of put all the links in, put all the references in, so that if you are interested in this as an issue, because I don't think it's enough. I know they've only been back and forward sort of like twice, two exchanges, but this is something much bigger. How do you deal with this? How how are you going to deal with prophesying into other nations? Are you not even going to? I think what's happened here is very significant and very important, and there's valuable work that's been done. Within sort of like within GPA, what GPA is doing, and the insights, and sometimes you can get this thesis and antithesis. Get a bit Hegelian, aren't we? I've managed to get a bit of philosophy into the video. Amen, hallelujah. It's like, but sometimes you get the thesis and antithesis, and then you get some sort of this clash between them that then gives something. This new emergent comes out of it. So it may be that maybe this is maybe this is you were well. God can take the extremes of and get something of the insights that are then somehow come into a new synthesis, and even though it might only be this one thing that we've done right, I think you often see this this is an interesting thing, I think, in philosophy. It may just be that there's one insight of this philosopher, one sort of like core thing that they actually bring, and there are the other 90% of their philosophies that where they've tried to work this out, and the implications of this might be completely worthless. But you can see, I think probably Nietzsche is probably one of those finest examples of that, because he was such a radical thinker. It's very easy to just dismiss, he went insane and died of syphilis, insanity from syphilis probably. But he philosophized with a hammer, didn't he? And he was so outrageous in some of the things he said, but but because he was prepared to think totally outside of the box and to say, right, God's dead, right? So how do we redefine our life here? And it wasn't just that. I think that's almost too simple. But he understood the implications of saying God is dead, right? What is the and he tried to work out those implications of, and so I think maybe we can get encouragement from sort of like from understanding that, yes, maybe there's something that GPA have highlighted, one thing, within a weakness within, say, the consciousness of, they've got some sort of useful insight into trying to keep these things separate, keep the politics and keep something separate, and maybe there's something in that, but I think that's really missing the remarkable opportunity for rolling back evil throughout the world because of what's going on in the US at the moment. And I think anybody who's been enmeshed, and in a sense I've been immersed in that, I think that's what I'm sort of like trying to say, is that I've almost been like immersed in what's been going on in the US, because I've just had this, I can just see there's been something going on that's really very, very significant and very, very important. And people from all around the world have been doing that as well. That's the amazing thing, is that there's been these people praying for the US, there's been these people engaged and outside of this sort of spiritual sort of stuff, but they've understood something really significant and really, really important is going on in the US, and it's focused around this Trump figure. That's a remarkable thing. It's focused about this but he's, in the sense, is the figurehead, but he's been bringing this amazing team together. So, let's proclaim, the rebirth of the US, and the rebirth of the nations, and the restoration of the nations, and the breaking off and the rolling back of this power of darkness, rather than this, wanting the death of democracy and then the destruction of our nation and of a government. To me, that's just cursing, so, that's what one of the condemnations of the ACPE gave of that type of thing, was that it just seemed to be, it wasn't redemptive, it was cursing. So, but that's more their business. My sort of like point is, we should at least have the prophetic discernment that we can understand that something, that God has raised up a team of people without, it's like, Tulsi, Pete Hegseth, Elon Musk, they're just a remarkable team, and RFK and stuff. They're a remarkable team with astonishing vision and an amazing amount of skill, articulate, intelligent people. And so, let's get on board with what God's doing and pray for their nation, and to see the effects of that. And we've seen that effects. We've seen the outbreak of peace and sanity within the world since that's happened. It's encouraged. What I mean? It makes such a difference what's going on in the US. So let's rejoice, be positive, and not collapse into this negativity. Okay, God bless you. See you again.